June Langford coughed blood. Her son Kyle smirked from the couch. "She pulls this when she wants attention," he told the nurse. That night, June revoked his power of attorney. By morning, he was written out of her estate, permanently. He thought she was fragile. She was filing. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. June felt the warmth before she saw it, the sharp copper tang rising in her throat, followed by a wetness against her palm. She coughed once, then again, harder this time. Red bloomed across the tissue like spilled ink. "Is that—" the nurse started, stepping forward from the doorway, her clipboard forgotten. June nodded, chest tight. "Yes." Across the room, Kyle didn't flinch. Reclined in her recliner, one socked foot crossed over the other, he kept his eyes locked on the screen. Baseball. 9th inning. Nothing urgent. "She's dramatic like that," he said with a chuckle, waving his hand without turning his head. "Always has been." The nurse froze mid-step. The room, already tense, pulled taut like a held breath. Kyle took a sip from his soda, then belched softly. "She gets a tickle in her throat and acts like it's the last rites." The nurse turned back to June, slowly, like someone trying to disguise alarm as professionalism. Her eyes scanned June's face, her lips parted as if to speak, but she didn't. Not there. Not then. The examination ended 10 minutes later. Blood pressure, low. Oxygen, borderline. Chest sounds, irregular. June sat upright now, fingers stained, lips dry. The nurse snapped off her gloves with a deliberate tug, then turned to Kyle. "She really should be seen. Today." Kyle shrugged. "If it gets worse, we'll go. She's got a flair for the dramatic, you know." The nurse didn't argue. She just nodded once, too slowly, and gathered her bag. But when they reached the hallway, she paused just before opening the front door. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Ms. Langford, I'm not documenting anything today, but you need to go. This isn't something to wait on." June nodded once. "I'll go. Alone." Their eyes locked briefly. The nurse squeezed June's hand. "Promise me," she whispered. "I don't make promises I can't keep," June said. "This one, I'll keep." The urgent care waiting room smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. Flu posters lined the pale blue walls, and somewhere behind the partition, a child whimpered while cartoons blared through a cracked iPad speaker. June sat straight, coat still buttoned, tissue gripped in her lap like a secret. They called her back in 12 minutes. The nurse practitioner, young and soft-voiced, raised an eyebrow at the results of the chest X-ray. "There's a shadow in your upper right lung," she said gently. "We can't say for sure what it is, but it's enough to warrant a specialist. I'm ordering a CT scan and a referral to pulmonary." June swallowed. The tissue in her lap was fresh, but stained again. "Is it urgent?" she asked. "It could be," the nurse said. "You'll need someone with you for the testing days. The procedures might be taxing." June nodded. "I'll manage." Outside, dusk had fallen, the parking lot slick from a passing rain. The headlights of passing cars made the sidewalk shimmer as June sat in her idling sedan, the silence around her so absolute it buzzed in her ears. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Instead, she pulled her phone from her purse, her fingers trembling slightly not from fear, but from something more specific. Resolve. In the search bar, she typed, "Power of attorney revocation, adult son." The suggestions auto-filled before she could finish typing. She tapped the first link. The porch light was still off when June pulled into the driveway. Her headlights swept over the house she paid off before Kyle turned 15, its brick face unchanged, except now it felt like a structure she was only renting her breath in. Inside, the smell of grease hung heavy, the telltale sign of delivery. On the coffee table, an open pizza box, crusts already hardening. Her son sat cross-legged on the couch, controller in hand, eyes locked on a glowing screen. "You're back," he said without looking up. "That dramatic monologue didn't turn into a hospital stay, huh?" June didn't answer. He snorted. You deserve an Emmy, you know that? That nurse looked like she was about to call 911. Poor woman doesn't know you've got flair. She stepped past him without a word, toward the kitchen. The medicine cabinet was untouched. The prescription bag sat in the corner of the counter, unopened, sealed. She lifted it slowly, as if it might dissolve in her hand. A thin layer of dust had started to form on the top flap. Next to it, her oxygen monitor, still in its packaging. The receipt was curled inside the plastic, time-stamped 2 weeks ago. She opened the fridge. No new groceries. The milk was 2 days past expiration. She stood still for a moment, letting the weight settle not on her shoulders, but behind her ribs, deep where no one could reach anymore. That night, June sat in her bedroom with the door locked, the old journal pulled from the bottom drawer of her nightstand. The pages were soft with time. She hadn't written in months. He lives here like he owns me, not with me. The power of attorney was supposed to protect, not possess. I'm done playing hostess in a house I built. She set the pen down and stared at the ink until it bled into memory. Then she picked up her phone and scrolled until she found the number. Naomi Abrams, estate attorney. Retired briefly, then returned to work. For women who need their names back. June pressed call. Voicemail. She waited for the beep. Naomi, she whispered, voice careful, the way women speak when walls have ears. It's June Langford. I need to pull my name back from his mouth. She ended the call and placed the phone upside down on the dresser. The next morning, June moved quietly. She waited until Kyle left, keys jingling, door slamming, his scent lingering in the hallway like oversprayed cologne and undercooked apologies. She retrieved her documents from the metal file box in her closet. Pension statements, property title, bank account access codes. She placed them one by one into a manila folder and then slid that folder into the bottom drawer of her dresser, the one with the false back panel. She added a lock to the drawer, small and brass. The rest of the statements, copies, went into her purse. She would not misplace herself again. That afternoon, she found a padded envelope in the mail, addressed to Kyle Langford, POA on file. Inside, another insurance offer, addressed in her name, signed with his. He was still signing on her behalf, still pretending she was too fragile to notice. June took the envelope to her shredder and fed it through slowly, watching the paper dissolve. The house stayed quiet until evening, when her phone rang. Naomi. June answered on the first ring. Do you want to revoke all rights? Naomi asked calmly. Or just start with financial? June didn't hesitate. Start, she said, but don't stop. Next day, June sat on the crinkling paper sheet in exam room 3, the cuff still tightening around her arm. She could hear her heartbeat ticking through the monitor, steady but slower than usual, like even her body was waiting for the next page to turn. The pulmonary specialist, Dr. Malik, was younger than she expected, maybe mid-30s, with a thoughtful frown and careful eyes. He stood beside a glowing monitor displaying her chest scan, where the hazy bloom still ghosted the upper right lung like a watermark. Based on the preliminary imaging, he said gently, I believe you may be dealing with MAC, Mycobacterium avium complex. It's uncommon, but we caught it early. It's treatable. June nodded. She didn't flinch. But it's not quick, he added. Antibiotics, daily routines. Several months minimum. We'll need consistency, clear tracking of symptoms, and... He paused. Do you have support at home? June's eyes held steady. My son's helpful. The lie tasted clean in her mouth, but only because she'd rinsed it in silence so many times before. She thanked him, scheduled her next scan, and left the office with a manila folder in her bag. Outside, the spring air was sharp with pollen and hot concrete. The traffic lights blinked too slow, the sun too loud. She didn't drive home. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of a corner cafe she hadn't visited in years. It used to be where her quilting group met on Tuesdays, before the women moved south, got sick, or simply stopped replying. Inside, it smelled like roasted espresso and old brick. She sat by the window, ordered a black tea with lemon, and took out the small folder tucked beside the medical paperwork. Her healthcare proxy. The name listed beside primary medical agent, Kyle Langford. She stared at it for a long moment. The server brought the tea. She didn't drink it. Instead, she opened her email. One unread message from Naomi. Subject: Revocation documents. Healthcare and finance attachment, Langford, Brosk Proxy, revocation.pdf. She clicked print to local, walked to the counter. Do you mind? She asked, holding up the tablet. The barista blinked. You want to sign something here? June nodded. Flat surface, ink pen, legal clarity. He smiled, confused but compliant, and cleared a spot near the register. She signed both pages, firm and legible. Then she scanned them back into her phone. She didn't feel powerful. She felt present. It was dusk when she returned home. The porch light was off again. The curtain in the living room swayed from the cracked open window, though the air didn't need to come in. From the front hall, she heard Kyle before she saw him, his voice bouncing off the drywall like gum snapped between teeth. Chest pain, yeah, always when the bills come in or someone's got eyes on her meds. I swear it's like her lungs sink with guilt. A pause, then laughter. His and someone else's. A woman's. She fakes chest pain when she wants attention, he said again, louder this time, like he knew she'd just walked in. June didn't speak. She walked to the kitchen, slowly, and placed the signed proxy documents in a new folder labeled Active Protections. Then she pulled the oxygen monitor from its box. She wasn't dramatic. She was finally documented. June lay on the couch with her eyes closed, breathing through her nose, quiet and shallow. Across the room, Kyle paced with his phone against his ear, voice sharp and smug. I swear she sleeps 20 hours a day now, he was saying. If she were a cat, she'd be earning her keep. A pause, then laughter. She's got this nurse who comes by, right? I think she's got a crush on me. Blonde, serious, keeps looking at me like I should be tucking her in. I almost offered to help her take Mom's pulse. Another laugh. Longer this time. Louder. June stayed still. He walked past her on his way to the kitchen, muttering something about leftovers. She could smell the cold garlic knots even before he opened the fridge. The scent made her stomach turn. She waited until she heard the freezer door shut before she slipped her hand beneath the throw pillow and pressed stop on the recorder tucked beneath it. The red light dimmed. The files were backing up to the cloud, thanks to Beverly. Beverly had always been more than a friend. She was a war nurse turned administrator, practical and unflinchingly loyal. And now, legally, she was June's new executor. Naomi had sent the revised living will yesterday. June had signed it in the early hours, the ink drying under a kitchen lamp as Kyle slept 10 feet away, oblivious. Beverly would have the authority to speak for her, act for her, protect her, should things progress. Not if, when. That morning, June opened a folder marked 2001 to present. Inside, pension summaries, house deed, life insurance, and records of her CD accounts. One by one, she verified them, photocopied the originals, and slid them into a new red folder labeled Asset Lock. Her hands didn't shake. They moved with the certainty of a woman who had once budgeted for braces and car repairs on a part-time librarian's salary. By evening, the documents were placed into a safety deposit box under her name and Beverly's. She left Kyle a note. Doctor's appointment. Took the bus. She didn't mention the bank. Later that night, she stood in the hallway with the ficus in her arms, adjusting the soil and patting the rim with care. Inside, embedded just beneath the first layer of dirt, a slim black voice recorder, motion-activated, cloud-synced. It would pick up what she couldn't always catch, what she couldn't always prove, what people often chose not to believe. June returned the pot to its corner with steady hands. She was done being anecdotal. The next morning, Kyle chuckled over breakfast as he scrolled his phone. She must have filled out a Yelp review, he said with a smirk, gesturing vaguely toward the window. The nurse? She emailed me something about protocols, like I don't already know how to help you. He didn't notice June stiffen. What he didn't know was that the nurse hadn't emailed him. She'd emailed the Department of Elder Services, CCing Naomi and June with documented observations, timestamps, and a single subject line: potential neglect, unresponsive POA son on file. June texted Naomi that afternoon: documents secured, recorder active, Beverly confirmed. The reply came seconds later: Naomi, we need to meet, in person, no paper trail. The air in the park was sharp with early spring chill, sunny but deceptive, the kind of weather that made promises it had no intention of keeping. Naomi was already waiting, seated on the far end of a bench beneath a cluster of dogwoods. No briefcase, no papers, just a thermos of coffee and her phone tucked into her coat pocket like it barely mattered. June approached slowly, every step careful but assured. Her scarf fluttered in the breeze, the fibers brushing against her cheek like breath. No paper trail? Naomi said by way of greeting. Like you asked. June sat beside her, adjusting the hem of her coat. We speak, we walk, we disappear. Naomi smiled faintly. Then let's begin. They walked the perimeter of the park path, a slow circle shaded by budding branches and the occasional jogger. Everything's ready, Naomi said. We created a silent transfer. Your home is now under the Langford Living Trust. You're the primary. Beverly is your successor trustee. In case of incapacitation or death, she inherits immediately. No contest. June didn't stop walking. And Kyle? Removed, Naomi said flatly. From property, assets, and medical authority. The financial POA was revoked last week. This morning we filed the final healthcare revocation. Notarized, state-certified, he has zero standing. June exhaled. Not relief, not fear, just a soft release of air she hadn't realized she was holding. Good, she said, but we're not sending the notice yet. Naomi glanced over. You want him to be blindsided. I want him to meet the truth the same way he met my cough, June replied. Too late and unprepared. Naomi gave a small, satisfied nod. You know, most women in your position want quiet resolution. I want quiet correction, June said. He erased me. I'm just writing myself back in. They sat again at the bench, sipping from Naomi's thermos. A pair of children screamed in delight nearby, kicking at a soccer ball that veered wildly off course. June didn't flinch as it rolled toward them. I used to be afraid of confrontation, June said softly, watching the ball bounce down the hill. But silence is worse when it's misread as weakness. Naomi's voice was measured. There's strength in not announcing strategy. June smiled, thin, knowing. Let him open the door and find out. By the time she got home, the sky had shifted. Clouds layered themselves like gauze across the sun. The house was quiet, too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator was the only thing breaking the stillness. She walked into her bedroom to check her oxygen monitor, something she'd begun doing religiously, not for her health, but for pattern. The cord hung loosely from the wall, the plug halfway out of the socket. She stared at it for a long moment. No one had vacuumed. No one had shifted furniture. No accidental movement, just quiet extraction. She pressed the plug back in. The machine beeped softly. Power restored. Then her phone rang. Mrs. Langford? It was Beverly's voice, low and concerned. I came by to drop off those documents you left at the bank. Kyle answered. I asked if you were home. He said you were sleeping and, well, it was strange. June walked to the hallway where the ficus stood. The red light on the recorder blinked once, then faded. It had caught everything. He unplugged the oxygen machine, Beverly continued. He said it was accidental, but he looked right at it when I walked in. Said it was probably not necessary today. June's hand curled around the banister. Her lungs didn't panic, but her resolve sharpened like glass left in a flame. Thank you, Bev, she said. Bring the envelope tomorrow. I think it's time he reads something official. June had once taught first-year undergrads how to dissect courtroom testimony, how silence, when paired with timing, said more than 1,000 frantic words. She used to write, "Intent hides in routine" on the board. Now she scrawled the same phrase in the margin of her notepad, next to a growing list titled, "Neglect Patterns, Kyle." The cameras arrived in 2 discreet brown boxes. No branding, no setup guide, just a QR code and a promise of encrypted cloud storage. She placed one behind the living room bookshelf, angled just wide enough to catch the couch, the hallway, and the front door. Another inside the vented panel near the kitchen table, high enough to catch a clean sweep of the counter and her medications. The third, inside the linen closet, facing the oxygen monitor. It took Beverly 15 minutes to help configure the sink. 1 hour later, June received her first real-time ping. Motion detected. Entry hallway. Kyle had just returned from a grocery run that had lasted 4 hours. No bags in hand. She watched the clip twice. Over the next week, June logged timestamps with the precision of a paralegal on deadline. She noted every day he claimed to be home but wasn't. Matched it to the ring logs on the front door. Matched that to his social media. Screenshots of check-ins, selfies, bar receipts. Each one printed, dated, labeled. The pill bags remained untouched in the upper cabinet. Twice, she watched Kyle pour cereal and walk past the meds, reaching for chips instead. Once, he knocked a prescription bottle onto the floor and didn't even glance down. She didn't say a word. She recorded it all. Naomi called on Thursday. "I'm prepping the neglect packet," she said. "If he contests anything, this will be our spine. It's real-time, time-stamped, and backed by state-approved neglect definitions." "I'm not interested in punishment," June said, voice steady. "I'm interested in prevention." "Understood," Naomi replied, "but we'll be ready for either." That night, June used a VPN and logged into the state's Adult Protective Services portal. Anonymous tip submission. She typed slowly. Adult son listed as caregiver. Frequently absent. Prescriptions neglected. Oxygen machine recently unplugged. Patient now independently handling care with assistance from non-family third party. Video and time-stamped evidence exists. Please evaluate. She didn't sign it. Didn't have to. The following morning, she met with a notary at a small real estate office 2 towns over. The woman barely glanced at her ID, just stamped, signed, and nodded. The paperwork transferred her deed once again to the Langford Living Trust. Quietly. Legally. Unreversibly. When June asked how long it would take to finalize, the notary replied, "It's done the moment I seal this." June exhaled as the red seal pressed into the page. She returned home to find Kyle pacing in the driveway, phone in hand, a crumpled envelope half stuffed into his hoodie pocket. He spotted her stepping out of the car and stalked toward her, jaw tight. "Did you change something in your will?" he asked, voice low but sharp. June didn't flinch. "Why?" she replied, eyes calm. "Lose your place in the story?" He stared at her like she was speaking a different language. She stepped past him, unlocked the front door, and walked inside. The silence that followed was sharp, clean, like the break of a bone you'd always suspected was cracked. Kyle didn't argue. He didn't plead. He did what entitled men do when the narrative starts slipping from their grip. He retreated, packed a duffel bag sloppily, slammed the front door loud enough for someone to ask why. No one did. He left a note on the counter that read, "Going to Ryan's for the weekend. Text if it's an emergency." June folded it in half, slid it into the trash, and covered it with a paper towel. The next morning, Naomi served the official notice. Priority mail, certified signature required. Kyle wouldn't be home to sign for it, but June didn't care. It would wait for him, the same way she'd waited for dignity to be respected. Revocation of all medical and financial powers. Effective immediately. Executor and proxy rights reassigned. No apologies, no footnotes, just law. Beverly arrived the following afternoon with her overnight bag and a warm casserole. "You look steadier," she said, handing over a small pouch of chamomile tea. June smiled, eyes tired but clearer. "I'm ready to begin treatment, officially." They sat together as June took her first round of antibiotics, the pills lined up like soldiers on the counter. Beverly logged the time in a spiral notebook. For the first time in weeks, June didn't feel like she had to watch her back while swallowing. The days that followed were methodical. Therapy schedules, inhalation sessions, breathing logs taped to the fridge. Beverly read her vitals like scripture. June ate full meals, soft eggs, roasted carrots, chicken soup laced with turmeric. Her body responded in degrees, more strength, less coughing, sleep that didn't feel like a sedative, but the biggest shift wasn't in her lungs, it was in her voice. On Sunday evening, June sat in front of her laptop, ring light dimmed to warm glow. The recording app blinked red. She smoothed her blouse, adjusted the collar, and began. "This is June Langford. This statement serves as confirmation that my estate, medical directives, and power of attorney have been reassigned. All documents are updated, filed, and verified. These decisions were made of sound mind and under no external pressure. This message is dated and time-stamped, and it will be stored in 3 secure locations." Her voice didn't quiver. She didn't re-record. She clicked Save, named the file, estatestatementfinal.move. That night, as she sipped tea with Beverly, her phone buzzed once. A text from Naomi. "Process server booked. Delivery next week." Naomi books a process server for the following week. The knock came just after noon. 3 short raps, no doorbell, no hesitation. The kind of knock that doesn't wait for permission. June was in the kitchen, her hands deep in a bowl of cinnamon dough, the scent of butter and nutmeg curling through the house like a memory that knew its place. She didn't stop kneading. Beverly, seated at the small breakfast table with a legal pad and a mug of Earl Grey, looked up at the clock. Right on time. June didn't look toward the door. She didn't have to. Kyle's footsteps came thudding down the stairs, quick, annoyed. He hadn't been home more than 12 hours and already made it clear he was just visiting until things got straightened out. He pulled the door open with a half laugh in his voice. "Yeah?" The man on the porch wore a black jacket, clipboard in hand, and a badge clipped to his belt. "Are you Mr. Kyle Langford?" Kyle's tone shifted. "Depends." The man extended 2 sealed envelopes. "You've been formally served. Termination of financial and medical authority, and a secondary packet, estate notification, dated and filed. You've got 30 days if you intend to contest, which I'd advise against." Kyle didn't take the envelopes immediately. "Wait, what is this?" "Revocation and exclusion," the server said evenly. "Legal and binding." He handed the papers into Kyle's limp grip. "Have a good afternoon." Then he was gone. The front gate clicked once. The wind rustled. June didn't move. She twisted the dough, rolled it again, reached for the glass pie dish with the steady hands of a woman who used to teach baking workshops between single motherhood and night classes. Beverly stood and crossed to the kettle. She poured steaming water over a fresh bag, let the scent of peppermint rise like a flag of calm. In the other room, Kyle's voice sputtered. "What the hell? Mom! Mom!" June layered the rolls in the dish and dusted them with sugar. The oven clicked as it preheated. Kyle stomped toward the kitchen doorway. "You just excluded me from your will?" he barked. "Without even talking to me?" She turned, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and met his eyes. Her voice was soft. "I talked to you, Kyle. You just weren't listening." He blinked, thrown by the calm. Beverly, still behind him, held up the second mug. "Tea?" she offered with unshakable cheer. Kyle's jaw clenched. "Number, I want a family meeting." June raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting you act like family now?" His face flushed. "You can't just do this without a—" "I didn't do it without anything," she cut in. "I did it with planning, with counsel, with documentation, the same things you ignored every time you turned up the TV, instead of asking how my lungs were doing." He swallowed, the silence finally settling around him. The timer on the oven beeped softly. Beverly poured the second mug anyway and set it on the table, next to the legal pad. "You okay?" she asked, voice low as Kyle stormed back into the hallway, the front door slamming moments later. June nodded. "I'm better now that my documents speak louder than my lungs." She pulled the dish from the oven and set it on the cooling rack. The rolls hissed softly as steam escaped. Outside, a car engine started, aggressively. peeled off down the street. Inside, peace spread like heat from the oven. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. Text from Kyle. "I want a family meeting." Tonight. The dining room hadn't held a family meeting in over a decade. The last time was when Kyle's high school principal called about the car keys he'd taken without permission. He'd cried then, too, but those were teenage tears. Immature, performative. Now the table was clean, cleared. No placemats, no centerpiece. Just a laptop, 2 manila folders, and a single digital voice recorder, sitting in the center like an unblinking eye. June sat at the head of the table. Beverly, silent but present, stood by the entryway, arms crossed loosely, a legal pad under one arm. Kyle arrived late. He came in loud, door swinging open, boots striking tile, keys tossed with performative force onto the counter. "You ambushed me," he snapped before even stepping fully into the room. "Who serves their own son like he's a stranger?" June didn't answer. He dropped into the chair across from her and leaned forward. "You didn't even talk to me first. You revoked everything. You cut me off." June calmly reached for the recorder and pressed play. His voice, tinny and cruel, filled the room. "She fakes chest pain when she wants attention. She sleeps all day, probably just wants pity. I mean, she's not exactly dying, she just acts like it." Kyle blinked. Color drained from his cheeks. "Where did you—" She slid the recorder aside and opened the first folder. Hospital referral timeline. She laid out printouts neatly annotated, dates of her symptoms, the diagnosis, the appointment Kyle never asked about, highlighted passages from the pulmonologist's notes. "Is this your proof? You really think this is enough to—" She opened the second folder. Estate revision evidence, legal signatures, notarizations, date-stamped correspondence with Naomi, witness statements from the bank, cloud logs from the oxygen monitor's disconnection. Then she spoke, calm, even. "You didn't think I'd track anything. That was your mistake. But worse, you didn't care that I might have to." Kyle sat back, arms crossed. "This was calculated. You planned this." "No," June said. "I protected myself when you wouldn't." The silence between them was heavy, not emotional, just final. Kyle's expression cracked, his voice softened. "You could have just asked for help. You didn't need to do all this. You didn't need to embarrass me." June raised an eyebrow. "I didn't need to be dying on the couch for someone to notice," she said. "But I was. And you didn't." He shifted uncomfortably, then pushed up from the chair, pacing now. "I was trying. I've got my own life, Mom. I didn't sign up to be a nurse." She didn't flinch. "You did, actually, when you accepted power of attorney, when you signed that form at the hospital and said you'd handle it. But you didn't handle anything." Kyle's eyes darted to the documents on the table. "I can contest this," he said. "Legally. I still have time." June stood slowly, calm in the way that unnerves the unaccountable. "Yes, you can," she said. "But if you do, that folder grows, and the next person who hears those recordings won't be me." She nodded toward the digital recorder. "It'll be a judge." Beverly stepped forward, placing a printed copy of the revised trust on the table, spine facing Kyle. "I'd suggest you read this first," she said, "and maybe ask yourself why the only thing you're trying to fight for is your access." Kyle's mouth opened, then shut again. The flush in his cheeks had spread to his ears. He looked down, no longer furious, just exposed. June picked up the 2 folders and began stacking them into her briefcase. "This meeting," she said without looking at him, "is adjourned." But as he turned toward the door, keys clenched in his fist, he threw one final line over his shoulder. "I'm not done. I'll contest it. Just wait." June didn't respond. She didn't need to. The next morning, June woke earlier than usual. Her breathing was smoother, her pulse quiet. In the kitchen, Beverly was already making coffee, the soft burble of the pot joining the low hum of the refrigerator, 2 signs of things that still worked. By 9:03 a.m., Naomi had called. "I've got the full defense packet assembled," she said. Everything's indexed. Recordings, medical files, camera logs, financial transitions. If he contests, we're already 3 steps ahead. June nodded, tucking the phone between her shoulder and chin as she reviewed the trust amendment Naomi had emailed over. I want that new clause added, the one you mentioned. Naomi hesitated for only a second. Are you sure? June didn't blink. Absolutely. The clause was simple, unemotional, devastating in its finality. Any legal challenge to the estate or trust will result in permanent disinheritance. No exceptions, no appeals, no re-entry clauses. It was more than legal armor. It was a boundary written in permanent ink. June signed it with a black pen, pressing hard enough for the ink to bleed through to the second page. That afternoon, Beverly found her on the porch, the new chair finally delivered and assembled, sunlight-facing, wide arms, a cushion firm enough to support her spine, but soft enough to ease the tension that had lived there for years. You didn't have to, June said, motioning to the chair. Beverly smiled, setting down a glass of iced tea. It's not a gift. It's a symbol. You're staying seated now, but on your own terms. June sank into it and exhaled. Feels better than the couch ever did. Later, she opened her laptop and began typing a message, private, short, and deliberate. 2. Caregiver Support, Group, Northeast. Subject: If you're ever questioned. Always keep records. The world doesn't believe sick women until they've filed something. Your memory may be sharp, but timestamps are sharper. Document everything, especially silence. She hit send, then stared at her inbox, debating one last gesture. After a moment, she opened a blank email and addressed it to Subject: Thank you for saying something when you weren't required to, for listening when I couldn't ask for help. You were the first person who believed me before I proved it. You changed more than a diagnosis. June Langford. She clicked send to the nurse. By evening, the house was quiet. The storm hadn't come. Kyle hadn't called. He hadn't shown up. And that, in its own way, said more than any shouted confrontation ever could. June poured herself a glass of water, opened the sliding door, and stepped onto the porch, settling into the new chair. Her body sank evenly into it. No pain in the hip, no pressure in her chest. It wasn't a throne. It was better. Beverly stepped outside holding a small envelope. It was already open, folded once. The return address was handwritten. You need to read this, she said, handing it to June. June unfolded the letter. June, I saw what Kyle posted on his page. The way he described you. It was almost word for word what he said about me after we broke up. He used my credit. He lied to my parents. He ghosted me when I got sick, then called it needing space. I thought it was me. It wasn't. It's him. If you ever want someone to confirm the pattern, I'm here. Danielle June sat back, the letter trembling slightly in her fingers, not from fear, but recognition. She'd spent so long wondering if what she'd felt was specific to her. Now she knew. It was systemic. The paper felt heavier than it should. Not in weight, but in truth. June reread Danielle's letter a third time, eyes moving over each line like a former professor grading a final exam, not looking for errors, but for patterns. He used my credit. He ghosted me when I got sick. He lied to my parents, then made me apologize for it. June folded it in half and slid it into a plastic sleeve marked, Why File? Supporting Evidence. The folder had grown in recent weeks. Printouts of emails, screenshots of text threads, time-stamped neglect logs, copies of legal updates, all annotated in Naomi's neat block lettering. Danielle's letter didn't just confirm what June already knew. It proved her instincts had never been paranoia, just clarity disguised as discomfort. She opened her laptop, typed a simple response. Subject: Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate your honesty more than you know. I once thought I was overreacting. You reminded me I was just conscious. And finally, alert. With respect, June Langford. She hit send and then immediately forwarded the letter to Naomi with one line. If he contests, we use this. Character matters. The next morning, the house smelled like sourdough and lavender, the former from Beverly's early baking, the latter from the diffuser humming gently in the corner of the living room. June sat at the breakfast table, her laptop open to a Word doc titled The Cough Heard Around the Will by June Langford. The cursor blinked near the final sentence. She read it aloud softly. They only believed me once I had forms, but I was telling the truth the entire time. She saved the document, converted it to PDF, then opened the publishing site Beverly had shown her 2 days ago. With one final click, her story was no longer just hers. It was public. The first hour brought 14 downloads. By dinner, that number was 1,028. By the time June turned in for the night, the counter had crossed 6,000. No ads, no marketing, just the title, raw, ironic, true, and a story that resonated with anyone who had ever been dismissed as delicate instead of wounded. On the third day, an email came from a nonprofit she hadn't heard of before, Elder Voice Now, a group advocating for protective legislation and training within caregiving systems. Subject, Request to Speak. Elder Autonomy Series, Ms. Langford. We read your publication. We've shared it internally with all 10 of our advocacy teams. Would you consider speaking at our upcoming virtual summit on elder autonomy and legal preparedness? You've articulated what too many haven't been allowed to. We can offer an honorarium, and more importantly, a platform. Gratefully, Claire Dunn, Program Director, Elder Voice Now. Beverly found June standing at the sink, hands still wet, the email glowing from the phone she'd propped against the window ledge. "Well?" Beverly asked, wiping flour from her fingers with a dish towel. June's voice was quiet but certain. "They want me to speak." "As a warning?" June shook her head. "As a blueprint." She dried her hands, walked back to the kitchen table, picked up the manila folder labeled Final Revisions, and placed it next to the growing pile of responses, letters, and legal files. "I'm not the footnote anymore," she said. "No," Beverly replied. "You're the citation." Next day, the virtual summit lobby buzzed with anticipation. Tiny camera feeds blinked on, faces in squares, shoulders squared in suits and scrubs, nameplates reading LPN, JD, Daughter, Survivor. A quiet army of listeners. June sat in front of her laptop, shoulders straight, hair pulled back, not for vanity, but for clarity. Beverly adjusted the ring light behind the monitor, then stepped back, giving a thumbs up from the hallway like a backstage tech before opening night. Claire's voice chimed in over the stream. "Please welcome June Langford, retired educator, author of The Cough Heard Around the Will, and elder advocacy speaker." There was no applause, no orchestra cue, just 138 people leaning forward in silence. Perfect. June looked into the lens like it was a face she'd been waiting to speak to for years. "When I first coughed up blood," she said softly, "my son didn't look up from the television." The chat sidebar lit up instantly. "Following. Same here. Go on." "I was told I was being dramatic. What I was being was dismissed. Dismissed as old, as emotional, as background noise in my own medical narrative." She paused, breathed slowly, continued. "No one asked about my capacity to choose, only about who else could choose for me." For the next 12 minutes, June told her story. Not to relive it, but to dissect it. How she'd been ignored, how she'd been talked over, how every act of recovery had required documentation first and dignity second. She didn't cry, not because there was no grief left, but because clarity had dried it up. Her voice was even, measured, not rehearsed, but refined. "I don't want pity," she said. "I want policy, and I want preparation, because what happened to me wasn't unique. That's why it's dangerous." The chat surged again. Her closing line was not a whisper. It was deliberate, sharp enough to pierce. Silence doesn't equal consent. Sometimes it just means no one's listening. Then the camera blinked out, a beat of silence. Then the moderator's voice cracking slightly. "Thank you, June. That will stay with all of us." Within an hour, her inbox had 17 messages. The subject lines all echoed each other. Would you join us for an interview? Your story is what we've been waiting to feature. You're the conversation. One email stood out, subject line short, plain. Podcast guest request, Quiet Power series. June opened it. Ms. Langford, we focus on voices that have been systematically minimized in caregiving and legal spaces. We don't do fluff, we do facts. Your facts. We'd be honored to share your mic next week. Celia, host of Quiet Power. She smiled. Not broadly, but the kind that reaches the corners of a life, finally being acknowledged. Beverly brought tea, setting it gently on the table beside her. You didn't shake once, she said, impressed. June sipped slowly, savoring the warmth. I've already done harder things, she said. Speaking is just the echo of survival. Beverly smiled. You're not invisible anymore. I never was, June replied. I was just unheard. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message preview glowed across the screen. Kyle, I didn't know you'd go this far. She didn't touch the phone, didn't answer, just let it vibrate until it silenced itself. The text sat on her phone for hours before June replied. She finally tapped back. She didn't soften, didn't explain. You stepped out when I was bleeding. I stepped up. She hit send, then deleted the thread. By mid-morning, Naomi met her at the courthouse. No need for pleasantries. They both knew what today was. Sealing day. Inside a small beige room where pens scratched louder than voices, June signed the final documents transferring full legal custody of her trust into a locked, irrevocable status. No revisions, no reinstatement clause. Naomi read the final line aloud just before the seal came down. No beneficiary may reassert claim if previously removed due to cause. A notary stamped it, sharp and deliberate. It's done, Naomi said, tucking the papers into a leather case. You're not just protected, June. You're bulletproof. Later that afternoon, June stood by her new mailbox, brushed steel with a high-security lock and no flag. She slid the key into place, turned it, and smiled at the satisfying click of resistance. Gone were the days of Kyle pulling letters before she saw them. She taped a small laminated label to the back. Langford Trust. No third-party access. Then she changed the house lock. Hired a handyman to reprogram the keypad. Only 2 codes now, hers and Beverly's. And for herself, she ordered something quiet but permanent, a small sterling silver necklace with a flat disc tag. Front, June Langford DNR, health proxy on file back, ICE, Beverly Harris, no POA assigned to son. She wore it under her blouse, cool against her chest, warm by noon. That evening, she sat at her laptop one final time to post something she never thought she'd share publicly, langfordfinalwill.pdf. She uploaded it to a secure shared folder, accessible only by her lawyer, executor, and, for transparency, any extended family member who tried to check in with concern after years of silence. The link was emailed once. No passwords, no backdoors. A simple subject line. This is what prepared looks like. Beverly poured 2 glasses of wine as the sun set low through the living room window, painting the hardwood floor gold. I never saw you do it out of spite, she said, handing June a glass. That's because it never was, June answered, swirling the Cabernet. Spite's temporary. This is legacy. Beverly tapped her glass to June's. To the quiet ones who document everything. June smiled. Let no one rewrite my final chapter but me. As the room dimmed, her laptop chimed. A private message had come in. Unknown sender. Subject line. Still thinking about that day. She opened it. Ms. Langford, I was the nurse who visited you that morning, the one your son dismissed. I've been following your story ever since, quietly, closely, carefully. You gave me courage I didn't know I needed, not just to file my first report, but to leave a home that treated me like I was disposable. I filed my own paperwork this week. I thought you should know. Jenna S. June read the message twice, once with her eyes, and once with something deeper. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, something settled. The podcast went live at 6 a.m. sharp. No promo blitz, no countdown. Just a single post from the Quiet Power account. New episode, Dramatic Like That, with June Langford. By 8:10 a.m., the inbox had 39 new messages. By noon, there were over 500 comments. And by dinner, her voice was rippling across platforms like a stone dropped in still water, each ring catching a nurse, a daughter, a mother who'd once been told they were too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional to trust. June sat on her porch with her tea, phone buzzing every few seconds. She'd muted notifications after the first hour, but she still opened the app every so often, scanning the flood. I documented my father's meds today, because of you. I stopped apologizing for asking questions. Thank you for making legal literacy feel like survival, not shame. Even Beverly got a message. Can your friend teach our nursing staff how to track POA misuse? Claire called later that night, her voice crackling through a Bluetooth headset as she drove between advocacy events. You're the voice we didn't have, she said, and the one too many women thought they couldn't be. June didn't respond right away. She was watching the sky soften from navy to ash. I didn't mean to start a movement, she said. Claire chuckled. That's how you know it's real. 2 days later, June's email pinged with a subject line that stunned her. Nominee notification, 2025 Caregiver Advocacy Award. She clicked it slowly. Dear Ms. Langford, your memoir, The Cough Heard Around the Will, has been nominated in the Written Impact category for its contribution to caregiver empowerment, legal clarity, and elder autonomy. You are a finalist. The selection panel was unanimous. Warmly, the Caregiver Honor Board June didn't cry. She did what she always did with news that once would have broken her. She printed it, filed it. Then she opened a fresh document titled Document Before Disaster, Workshop Series. It was time to teach. The first session launched on a Sunday morning. 63 participants logged in, cameras off but listening hard. Beverly led the pilot, her voice steady, sharp, but never cruel. She covered topics like durable power of attorney abuse, invisible neglect, and the language of strategic silence. June sat beside her off-screen, sipping coffee and highlighting phrases on her own printout. At the end, she stepped briefly into the frame just to say one line. Start your paper trail before you feel like you're unraveling. The screen lit up with hearts. Dozens of muted claps. One message read, You gave me a map. I'm following it. Later that evening, June shut her laptop, the screen still aglow with spreadsheets and attendance metrics. She leaned back into her chair and took a full breath. No wheeze, no tightness, just air. I didn't think we'd get this far, Beverly said softly from across the room. June smiled. Neither did he. The house was quiet again, but not like before, not hollow. Now, silence meant rest, not dismissal. Her phone rang. She expected another fan message, a scheduler, maybe Claire again. But it was her doctor. She answered quickly, posture straightening. June, he said, voice calm. Your latest scan came in. You're clear. She froze, then blinked. Once, twice. Say it again, she whispered. You're clear. Lungs look beautiful. Treatment worked. June stood up slowly, pressing a hand to her chest, not in fear, but disbelief. Outside, the wind didn't move. The world held its breath with her. Then she exhaled. Next day, the cursor blinked, waiting. Final entries always feel heavier, like the last word might echo louder than all the ones that came before it. June sat at her desk, fingers hovering, breath steady. Outside, morning light filtered through the window, buttery and warm, softening everything it touched. Her final blog post had no draft versions, no edits, just a title already typed, bold and defiant. He called me dramatic. The law called me right. She let the words sit, then began typing beneath it. They never expect you to speak back in language they can't talk over. Not rage, not desperation, but documentation. A timestamp, a trust, a name on a deed that isn't theirs. This story began with a cough and a laugh. It ends with a record, a ledger of what was done and what was reclaimed. This isn't about punishment, it's about precedent. For every woman who's been called difficult, emotional, confused, start keeping receipts, not just because you'll need them, but because they'll remind you who you were when no one believed you. Let silence be strategy, not surrender. Let survival be notarized. Let the next time someone underestimates you be the last time. She signed her name at the bottom. June Langford, documented. Then she clicked publish. The page refreshed. A confirmation popped up. Your post is now live. The stats began to tick upward within seconds. She didn't check them. Instead, she walked outside, into the garden that had once been overgrown with weeds and neglect. Beverly had helped her pull up the worst of it, clearing space, laying new mulch, reseeding the soil. Now the daffodils were pushing through like tiny yellow declarations. A stubborn rosebush was blooming too early, just to prove it could. June carried a small wooden stake and a hammer. At the garden's edge, just beside the trimmed boxwoods, she planted the sign, "Protected property. No trespass, no takebacks." It wasn't about the land, it was about the principle. She tapped the stake gently into the earth. No need to drive it in like a battle cry. The point had already been made. Inside, the living room was quieter than it had ever been. The old couch, the one she coughed on, the one Kyle sat on while dismissing her breath, was gone. Donated, hauled away without ceremony. In its place, a small sunlit reading nook by the bay window, one wide chair with high arms, a side table holding 3 books, a lamp with a soft gold glow. She sat there now with a glass of lemon water, feeling her lungs fill without resistance. No rasp, no pressure. Just air. She pulled a quilt over her lap. The tag on the back read, "Hand-stitched by JL-1998. She smiled. She had always been more than a moment of weakness. She'd just been waiting to be heard. Beverly knocked once on the doorframe, holding an envelope. "Mail came," she said, handing it over. "You've got 3 new invitations to speak, and a letter from a second-year law student who says your story made her change her thesis topic to elder legal protection." June opened the envelope slowly. Inside, a card with pressed violets and the handwritten note, "You reminded me my voice can be evidence too. Thank you." Marisol. As the afternoon waned, June moved through her house, touching things lightly as if confirming they were still real. The bookshelf, the framed trust documents, the updated will, her medical bracelet, her engraved necklace. She wasn't just living, she was recorded, witnessed, proofed. She returned to her nook, opened the window just slightly, and let in the breeze. The scent of soil, of lavender from the yard, drifted in. She closed her eyes, let the air move around her like it belonged. Her life had been proofread, her future, firewalled, her legacy, sealed, signed, shared,